Welcome to the Lineman Lounge, hosted by Mike and Evo, calling their shots and being outlandish.
Breaking news from the Lineman Lounge. My fantasy football team just took a huge fucking hit. And that also makes it even more likely that the Raiders are going to beat the Ravens on Monday night. Le'Veon Bell is about to be your starter. Latavius Murray is going to go there as well. Jesus, fuck my ass.
Get ready for the thickest podcast in the game. Coming to you from Hangar 6, where sleeves are optional. Strap in. The show starts right now.
Como están, bitches? The Lineman Lounge is back on an early morning Saturday. I am Sleeveless Mike. This man to my left, your right, is Stanford Evo Vold. We call him Evo. We're in Hangar 6. We're the thickest podcast in sports, and we are fucking pumped for the day. We got a ton of shit going on. Major League Baseball, they still fucking suck. We got UFC 272 tonight. Very excited. Rooting for Street Jesus. And then we also have a ton of shit from the NFL. We got Combine. Now, we are not going to break down all the positions of the Combine. We're going to break down quarterbacks today. And we'll give you guys kind of a timeline of when you can find us breaking down certain aspects of these prospects coming out. We're going to get into free agency as that goes along as well. But we got a ton of shit going on today. I got way more shit to do after this. I got to start, moving shit into the pod, packing up the house. We are selling the house, even if I do not take that job out in Cleveland. But yeah, no football this morning for me. So I've just been able to get up, have some breakfast, have some Dutch Bros, and have a pretty damn good morning. How you doing today, big guy?
My morning has been very short. I woke up and came here other than taking a shit pretty much. So
there we go.
It's not too bad so far. I don't really have a whole lot going on today in the pod and some college classes and stuff like that, and just enjoying the weekend. I
college class.
Feel like these weeks are just getting longer at work and shorter weekends, so it makes me want to do like a 3-day weekend every weekend.
Yeah, I very much feel that. I'm taking off Monday and Tuesday, so I can help kind of prepare and get everything going with moving things into the pod. Pod is coming to get picked up next Saturday. That is not this show, the pod. That is the pod that we are moving all of our shit in our house.
Basically a mobile storage unit.
Because I got my interview out in Cleveland next Monday. No. Well, because that would be 2 Mondays from now, I guess. The 14th, I'll be in Cleveland doing an interview. And then from there, hopefully, we'll be, as long as everything goes well with that interview, we'll be getting ready to head out that direction. So there's going to be some changes coming up with the show, potentially. We're definitely not going to be in this room next week, I don't believe, for the pod. We might be at the Evo annex of Hangar 6, maybe doing a little separate podcast, but the show's still going to go on.
Absolutely.
We're still going to bring content to the people. So speaking of bringing content to the people, should we get ready to dive into the show and kind of start with our first topic of the day?
Absolutely. Let's get into it. I think I'm going to go first off with baseball.
Yeah, we're going to start with baseball.
Something near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Near and dear to my heart. We've already started baseball practice for Little League. Baseball is not ever going to die. It's going to constantly be around. But Rob Manfred is fucking up Major League Baseball. The owners are fucking up Major League Baseball. This is a fucking problem. They are not going to start on time. We projected this, quite some time ago, that there was no way that this league year or the season was going to start on time. They've already canceled the opening series. They canceled the series afterward. They still do not have an agreement on when the season will start. The players unanimously rejected Major League Baseball's final proposal to them, and they are pretty much going to stand firm in their beliefs that, listen, we're not going to fucking bend to your will anymore, guys. We are the product. Without us, your product drastically changes, right? Jeff Passan even was on, I think he put on his Twitter that if you took the next 1,500 best baseball players in the world and you put them out on Major League Baseball field, that product severely suffers, right?
Yep.
Nobody's fucking signing up to watch the next 1,500 best baseball players. We don't want to see the best in the world. If you took the next 30 best businessmen in the world and you replaced all of the owners in Major League Baseball, there's not really any drop off. Some of it might even fucking improve because the owners are not that vital to the product of Major League Baseball. They don't like hearing that, but they need to accept that. Baseball needs to get back. They need to get going. Baseball's not going to die, but this severely hurts the league. Major League Baseball is the second most popular league in all of the United States. They're more popular than basketball or the NBA. They're more popular than soccer. Now, they don't hold a candle to the NFL. NFL is king. But they need to get back going. Otherwise, they risk dropping even further down that list, falling behind the NBA and their ratings. I don't know if they'll ever fall behind soccer here in America, but they need to get this shit figured out. The deadline passed. No idea when the new deadline is. What are your takes on all this and how you feeling? I know you're a passive baseball guy, but anytime you see this kind of shit, it can't sit well with you, right?
Yeah, I am all about the players. The players are what make sports fun. It's not the ownership group. It's not how much money they're making. It's those players and how they perform in the field. They need to be, it's easy to say like, oh, the players deserves more money. And then you look at, $1 million contracts and stuff like that. And you're like, this guy's getting paid so much to play a game. But at the end of the day, they are some of the best athletes in the world, best athletes in their sport. When, it's basic economics. If you're the best at what you do, you get paid the most.
Right.
And I'm not upset about that. I'm not upset when a 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old guy goes in the NFL draft and gets paid exorbitant amounts of money, millions of dollars, because they worked their ass off. They started working on their career from when they were 10 years old, sometimes, stuff like that, whether or not they know it, but they're putting in more work than a lot of people do for their career in a 4-year degree or something like that in college. They're putting in a decade's worth of work before they actually get to reap the benefits of it. It's worth it for those guys to get money. And for the baseball players to have the owners basically snubbing them, it just seems so greedy from ownership, from Manfred, outside looking in, that it's disappointing. And it does nothing but everyone's getting hurt.
Everybody is being hurt.
But it's, the owners are going to be fine.
The owners are definitely going to be fine.
They're going to be fine.
But there was never an issue.
You're wasting supremely talented players where they are on a limited time frame of how long you're going to be good, because age is something that you can only, hold off for so long, especially when you're not allowing PEDs and stuff like that.
Right. And now we're missing more time of potentially the greatest baseball player of all time in Mike Trout. We're missing more of his time in his prime.
Yeah.
There are the people who work in these stadiums who are not going to get to go to work. They're not going to be paid. The owners are going to be fine, right? Players are going to be fine, but players have also already started a fund to help these people who are affected in these stadiums not going to work and setting up a way that these people can be paid. Mm-hmm. So, and now obviously the owners are going to follow suit, but that only happens, I think, if the players start that thing.
Yeah, I don't know how much the owners are going to follow suit, to be honest. They will.
They're going to have to, otherwise it looks bad.
They're going to do something for PR. But look, even though things haven't been figured out, let's say they hammered out a deal next week, there's no reason why they couldn't start the league year on time. Right. Realistically, if people want to play, they'll play. Even if they lose some of spring training, they could still start on time theoretically. Yeah. But to already come out and say, hey, we didn't reach an agreement by this date, so now the league is not starting on time, it's it's a tactic.
Yeah, it's a self-imposed penalty that Major League Baseball owners could
Yeah.
get rid of. It was a tactic to try to leverage and force the players and make them look bad in the eye of the public appearance. And I don't think for the most part that's what's happening. I think most fans are kind of on the side of players this time, which they're not normally. For some reason, and we talked about it last week, I'll never understand why the typical average American is always on the side of the billionaire instead of the player who is the fucking product. But
I think in today's political climate and everything, economical climate, people are rooting a little bit more for the little man in things. And even though these players, compared to us, aren't the little man,
no,
they are the little man in this situation. And it is pretty clear and obvious to everybody that it's not the players necessarily being greedy, it's them wanting to get paid appropriately. And
not be manipulated by these owners.
Absolutely. So it's all good, based off the PR spin and stuff like that. Obviously, if the owners had been really deceptive, they could have probably spun this a lot better to be like, these guys are just asking for, way too much and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't do a good job of it. Everyone kind of sees through the bullshit. People are rooting for the players in this one. And it's sad for baseball fans, definitely sad for baseball fans. Hopefully in the long run, it ends up working out. I just like seeing that good unified front from the players, that they're standing strong on this and they're not.
There has not been really any dissension amongst the players, which has been fantastic to see. A lot of times we'll see that in the NFL negotiations, that the players kind of end up getting fucked a little bit because there is a little bit of dissension. Major League Baseball players have stood firm, said, no.
For what it's worth, a baseball player's career usually lasts longer than an NFL player's career. That's so true. They do have the opportunity to wait a little bit longer, as far as, not having to worry about age and taking years off of, an NFL player that plays 8 years and only really is profitable for maybe half of that compared to a baseball player that can go a hell of a lot longer.
Right. That's very true.
So they have the opportunity to hold off a little bit longer and hold this out. It is nice to see not only the players having that unified front, but media is completely behind them as well. I haven't seen a single good thing about ownership or Manfred.
No, I haven't seen any of that.
It's all downhill for them. So it's like, this is going to be a little bit of a war of attrition.
Yeah, I think so.
The thing is that, like we've said, I don't think the players are being greedy. The ownership and Manfred is being greedy. And the greedier person is usually the one that's going to fold first because they want their fucking money.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that this war is fought in the court of public opinion. And right now, the owners are getting their asses handed to them in the court of public opinion. So good on the players. I hope they get their shit. So right now, for me, the most hated people in the world, fucking Putin. And then directly below him is Rob Manfred. That's how much he is pissing me off right now. Obviously, he's not committing, atrocities against humans, but fuck Rob Manfred.
One could argue that.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you have to listen to him talk, that could be torture.
Yeah.
So.
And Aaron Rodgers, close third for me.
All right. I think we're good on baseball, though.
For sure,
so we're ready to dive into some UFC. UFC 272 tonight.
Yeah. It's a big night. We got Covington Masvidal tonight, UFC 272. It's going to be a fun one. I'm interested to get your take on that fight in particular, the Covington Masvidal. But we can start with some earlier fights if you prefer.
Yeah, you got the card pulled up because I don't have it pulled up. I am working on it. So not a bad little fight card. There's that younger kid coming back after like a 2-year layoff. I don't remember his name. Took a ton of fucking heat this week in the media because he was bashing the government here in the United States. So of course everybody came after him, and
I'm actually, so other than the fights in general, I'm interested to see what the UFC's response is going to be to the current political climate, because they have a lot of fighters.
They have a lot of Russian
Eastern
and
Europe,
Ukraine and
Russia, Ukraine, all that stuff. And we've seen some PR stuff put out by especially Ukrainian fighters, things like that, and other fighters in general who are standing up for what's happening in Ukraine,
right?
And condemning Russia. I haven't really seen anything from Russian fighters being like, fuck Ukraine or anything like that.
Right.
So it'll be interesting.
There's been a weird climate around sports, like the Russian Paralympic group just left China. They said we're not fucking competing anymore. Like we're not going to go through all this bullshit. And I think China was kind of pressing them a little bit as well. Organizations around the world have been kind of pressed to tell Russian athletes to fuck off, which kind of sucks. It's not their fault. They are not a part of that government. I would like to see guys compete. If you're the best in the world, I want to see you compete. Just because you're from that country does not make you just like the people who are higher up making those fucking terrible decisions. But it will be interesting because there is a massive group of individuals from those Eastern Bloc countries in the UFC. I wonder if there will be kind of anything said or put out. This fight is not happening overseas. It's happening in the United States. So there shouldn't be too much of an issue there. But did you get the card pulled up?
I did.
All right, sweet. So let's I believe the first main card fight has Greg Hardy in it, right?
Absolutely. That's former NFL defensive end Greg Hardy, who is now a UFC fighter. He's going to be fighting Sergey Spivak, I believe is his name.
Okay.
So
where's Sergey from?
I don't recognize the flag.
Is that Polish?
No, Moldova.
Moldova. Okay. Well, I hope he beats the fuck out of Greg Hardy.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Not a Greg Hardy fan.
I know. So Greg Hardy was a great football player. He's also a piece of shit human being who absolutely brutalized a woman. So every time I get to see Greg Hardy get knocked the fuck out, I am all for it. He's really not a good fighter. He is very strong. He is powerful. He can catch you and knock you out. I mean, he is a world-class athlete. He played in the most prestigious league in American sports. He's a fucking athlete, but he's a fucking douchebag. So I hope he gets laid the fuck out.
Yeah. I can get behind that.
So
next fight is Kevin Holland from the U.S. versus Alex Oliveira from, I believe, Brazil.
Yep.
That should be a fun one. I like Oliveira a lot.
I like Oliveira too. He just can't keep a streak going. He's very interesting, very fun fighter. Kevin Holland is a fucking monster though.
Yep.
I like Holland in that fight. Actually, I put in a little parlay on some of the fights this tonight.
Nice.
Because I feel really good about this last fight.
Okay. You're talking the main?
Talking the main.
All right. After that, we have Edson Barboza versus Bryce Mitchell. Barboza's name that you might recognize a little bit.
Right.
Also another fighter that I do really like. I don't know as much about Bryce Mitchell.
So Bryce Mitchell, that's the kid that's just coming back from like a 2-year layoff. Mm-hmm. Had some issues with the media because he was, saying that he doesn't like the current political standings of the United States government. And of course he caught shit for it because that's what happens anytime you say stuff like that. It's going to be very polarizing. I don't know much about the kid because he hasn't fought in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I kept this off of my parlay. I'll be interested to see how it goes. A lot of people have been saying this kid's been putting out a lot of shit on social media, telling this kid to shut the fuck up and just go out there and fight. And we'll see if you are what you think you are. So I'm interested to see how this fight goes. I could not give you a pick though.
I like Edson in this one. Barboza.
I know what Edson is.
Yes.
He's going to come in. He's going to be very smart. He's going to be very technical. And a kid who's been laid off from fighting for 2 years, that makes me worried about the pressure is going to be a little higher for this kid coming back into the ring. He hasn't fought in a long time.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
Yeah. I like Edson Barboza. The guy is fucking a chiseled Adonis and a very, very good fighter. He's 22-10 in UFC, and I like him in this fight. I don't really give a shit about the political climate stuff or whatever Bryce Mitchell's comments were because they are what they are. Yeah. Everyone's allowed to have
everyone's allowed to have whatever the fuck they want to say.
Unfortunately, if Bryce loses, then that's going to spin that narrative even further, which kind of sucks, but I think Barboza's got this one. The next fight, which is right before the main card, is Rafael Dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano. I don't know if I said that correct.
I think Moicano is a fill-in, though. There was, I believe, a pullout of one of the fighters. I don't remember who the fuck it was.
I'm not sure.
So Dos Anjos was originally scheduled to fight Rafael Fiziev this weekend, but he withdrew due to being sick with COVID-19. So Moicano is a fill-in on 4 days' notice. I mean, Dos Anjos, I feel like, was going to win this fight regardless, no matter who he fought. He's really good. He's a guy who's competed for titles. I believe has had the title before.
Mhm.
So
They get fucked up by the Korean Zombie, though.
Hey, that Korean Zombie is a good fucking fighter. He's never been like a title contender, but he'll come out of nowhere and absolutely sleep your ass. Like he's exciting to watch. But
Exciting to watch. That's going to be the main card, though.
That is going to be very exciting to watch.
Yeah. So I honestly don't know. I haven't really processed the main card completely, because I'm just excited to see these guys fight. They fucking just love to duke it out. I mean, obviously, Masvidal, stand-up puncher. Covington has a little bit more ground game in him, but he is absolutely willing to sit out there and just throw fucking haymakers as well.
No, yeah, I expect this to be a KO, TKO, or some sort of disqualification because of the bad blood.
Yeah. It could get pretty nasty out there. Part of me wants to lean Covington, just whether it's age or whatever, but I'm hoping for Jorge because I love Masvidal.
I love Masvidal too. So Colby should absolutely win this fight. He is the more accomplished, better fighter. He has, he doesn't have near as many losses. But I'm all in on Street Jesus, baby.
Yeah.
I'm going with Masvidal to fucking shut his lights out. I think Masvidal in his last fight got knocked out by Usman.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to come back and prove that he can fucking bang, that he can fight, that he might try to go for that third round with Usman. I don't know if that will ever happen.
The thing, one thing that scares me is that once a fighter gets knocked out,
it can happen easier after that.
Yeah, it tends to be a more common thing, and this is the first time we've seen that from Jorge. That's a little scary, but
yeah.
I kind of trust in, like you said, Street Jesus.
I want Street Jesus to fucking start Covington.
Man. Yeah, that would be great. That would probably be the best way for this fight to end. Would be a knockout with Jorge having his hand up at the end. That'd be pretty dope.
I don't see the way that this goes to a finish, to a 5-round decision. I think somebody will get finished one way or the other.
Yeah.
But so I told you guys I had a little parlay on this. So I got a Sergey Spivak minus 184, Kevin Holland minus 390, Rafael Dos Anjos minus 166, and Jorge Masvidal plus 265. I was so confident in this. I put $50 on this. 50 to win 567. So it means $100 or $10 will win you what? About 112-ish, 113 something maybe. So not a bad little bet there. I also have a $50 bet on Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal ending in a KO or a TKO because FanDuel right now has a boost of plus 200 on that. So I went $50 to win 150 because it's really hard for me to turn down plus 200 odds when I for sure see this being a knockout.
Yeah, it's not a little bad bet there.
Yeah,
I'm hoping the best for you on it. Like you said, Covington probably should win this.
Probably should.
But I think it's going to be a fun. Regardless, I see it being a little bit of a war, and I love that.
Yeah,
I love seeing those stand-up war fights. It probably will be worth the money for those of you, including us, who are going to pay for the event.
100% going to pay for it.
We always pay for these events.
Yeah. Because I love Dana White. I love paying, $80 for fights that maybe last 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So obviously going to shell out my hard-earned money right before I potentially move away across the country for this fight.
Absolutely. One other piece of, I guess, UFC-related news that we didn't talk about before the show, but I kind of wanted to bring up.
So we're talking about Cain?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, good. Because I was going to bring it up as well.
Yes. So Cain Velasquez, one of the best fighters ever.
Yep.
I think that he is a UFC legend. And from everything that I've heard, because I don't know the guy, but from people in UFC circles like Brendan Schaub and stuff like that, just a nice fucking dude.
Good dude.
Like a really good dude. And what has happened with him recently makes me feel even better saying that I think that he's a great fucking dude. So Cain Velasquez is currently incarcerated. He is accused of attempted murder.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird to say, huh?
So you say he's a great guy, but
great
then
guy
he's
for
accused of attempted murder.
Yes. Well, he tried to shot at a man who is accused of molesting underage children, including a relative of Cain Velasquez.
I believe it was his daughter.
That is the word. So this guy apparently has molested or is accused of molesting children over 100 times, including Cain's daughter. The guy was arrested for this stuff and put out on bail. California legal system has an extreme leniency towards this sort of stuff. That's part of where the pedophile, I don't want to say pedophile movement, but them looking at it as like a mental disorder type thing versus just being a sick fuck.
Yeah.
Is kind of looked at over in the far left coast. So either way, this guy arrested, put out on bail, and Cain's like, fuck this.
Yeah.
If I'm not a father, but I can understand and empathize a father in that sort of position. If your child is molested or anything like that, you don't really, the laws of man don't matter anymore.
Yeah, this has now become a primal.
I don't know that Cain gives a fuck about the legal process, and I don't blame him, because as far as I'm concerned, pedos can fucking eat it. So, and if this guy were to or does get fully charged for child molestation stuff like that and goes to jail, the prison justice system is going to take care of him anyways. But Cain didn't want the guy in the street anymore. He went after him, shot at him when the guy was in his father's vehicle. And I believe he actually ended up hitting the father when shooting at him. But Cain has been arrested, and there's been just an outpouring of support for Cain from the UFC community. Fighters are setting up GoFundMes and stuff like that to help his legal bills and things like that. And it's going to be a really interesting situation because if you take the child molestation out of it, obviously attempted murder is not a good thing.
Yeah, it's bad.
And in any other scenario, you'd be like, okay, yeah, this guy deserves to go to jail. However, in this situation, when you look at it from the stance of the DA, the prosecutors and stuff like that, they don't really, it's not a good look for California. California knows that people don't like pedophiles in general. You put away one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time, someone who by all accounts is a phenomenal person, who was doing something in trying to take out a pedophile. It's not going to be a good look in general for their legal system if they try to go at him with everything that the law can. I could see Cain doing some time, but I don't think he's going to do the full 15 plus that you would normally get for attempted murder.
I'm not sure he's going to get any time. Well, if he were in any other state, I don't know if he would get any time because it could be crime of passion, right?
Yes.
It could be, not in his right mental mind, in his mental state. This is, acting.
Cain's going to get a good lawyer. And I think
Cain's going to get a fantastic
lawyer. Good lawyer can argue the shit out of this. I've seen some stuff with legal pundits saying they think that when it's all said and done, he might see up to a year of prison time or 18 months or something like that.
Okay, that's not terrible. And I promise Cain will be just fine in prison. Nobody is going to fuck with Cain Velasquez in prison.
That's true.
So, but no, obviously I don't want him to go. So listen, I am a father, right? I don't want to necessarily advocate for violence. I prefer to not have violence. But as somebody who has committed violence in the past, in my time in the military, I understand when that becomes a necessity. If somebody were to come after, my son or my daughters, especially, I would have a hard time not being in this mindset. Now, do I know if it's premeditated? No, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to say that That's what the prosecutor is probably going to say. But his defender should absolutely be like, listen, he wasn't in his right mind, very mentally distraught, emotionally distraught, and then this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that defense would probably play. Amber.
Yep.
Producer Amber also on the free Kane train.
Absolutely.
This is a horrible situation. Not for Kane. Like Kane did, I think, what he should have done. I feel bad for the victims of this man, and I hope they get him off the street. I kind of like if he goes to prison justice is going to take care of it.
Always does.
Especially if Cain Velasquez happens to be put in the same goddamn prison.
There's no way that'll happen. There's no way that'll happen. Unfortunately, because the legal system does understand what happens to pedophiles or abusers of children in general when they go to prison, they usually put them in cushy, don't get fucked in the ass type prisons, like even to the point of you're going to go to solitary confinement,
right?
Which can be considered, harsh, cruel, unjust, or whatever. But it is honestly for the protection of the pedophile at that point, so that way they don't get absolutely gang raped and killed in prison.
Yeah, he's going to be licking grape jelly out of Thunder Dick's butt crack and then get shanked.
Yeah, it's not a good look when you're a pedo and you go to prison. So for all intents and purposes, I really have no qualms in saying that I hope this guy fucking eats it, especially if
Yeah, I don't. I never want to necessarily advocate for violence on the show, but in this situation, I'm all for it.
Yeah, when it comes to pedophiles, I believe I can speak for Mike that we're all about the violence.
Yeah.
I don't really have any qualms in saying that. So, but the Cain Velasquez situation is something that I definitely wanted to bring up because obviously it does revolve around sports. It revolves around UFC that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I don't blame Cain whatsoever. We're completely #free Cain. Part of that movement. That is something that is definitely trending on Twitter. If you're out there on the Twitterverse or whatever, free Cain is a movement that is definitely going down right now.
Definitely catching on with UFC guys too.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's nice to see that brotherhood. It's like fuck fighting, we'll put everything aside. Free Cain.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps it up for our UFC stuff, I believe.
Yep. So that's MLB, UFC. So the next thing we're going to do is going to dive into football. But before we do that, a couple of weeks ago, we spotlighted the Sierra Vista Elite cheerleaders and their excellent job that they did out in Las Vegas. They had one group, the Queens, who won grand champions out in Vegas, got a free bid out to the national or the world's the global championship in New Jersey this last weekend, and the girls came home as grand fucking champions of globals from this small little community here that we have in Sierra Vista. This group of girls did a fantastic fucking job. They went out, showed out, and are coming home as grand champions. Congratulations to the Sierra Vista Elite cheer group and especially that Queens team.
Absolutely. That's really awesome, girls. Fantastic job. And thank you for representing our relatively small town so well. To win any sort of a championship in your sport, in your competitive, realm is amazing. And to win at that high of a level is pretty incredible. That's awesome. So congratulations to them.
Absolutely. All right, man. Are we ready to dive into some NFL stuff?
I think so.
All right.
Absolutely. So NFL, we had the start of the combine earlier this week. Some position groups are already done.
Yep, we got highlights rolling over here on the TV.
We have more position groups going today. So we are going to, of course, break down the NFL draft or leading up to the draft, breaking down all these position groups. We're going to go through if we have sleepers. We're going to go through if we are all the top prospects at their positions, if they're guys that we think are perfect fits in certain scenarios. Today, we're going to go over just one position group, which is quarterbacks. We're going to spread this out, and I'm going to go through the schedule here with you guys in a little bit as to how we're going to go through position groups, kind of our schedule going forward. But before we get into that, NFL didn't sleep
Oh, no,
over the
never
last
does.
week since we last talked. So we do have some NFL news things that we want to talk about, other than specifically just the Scouting Combine. So for one, we knew that COVID was dead during the playoffs.
Yep, COVID was dead during the playoffs. Nobody talked about
And
it.
then it was kind of a thing at the beginning of the draft process where there was potentially players not going to be going to the draft, or not the draft, to the combine because of COVID rules. And the NFL was like, whoa, let's walk this back, and completely, got rid of that shit. And then earlier this week, the NFL reached an agreement with NFLPA where there's basically no COVID restrictions at all anymore, and COVID is over in the NFL.
Yeah, it's done. It's fucking super done. Like, they're not having any COVID restrictions whatsoever anymore. I read the headline. Now, I didn't dive too deep into the story because I figured at some point this was coming, but NFL ends COVID-19 protocols, which means there's going to be no testing for vaccinated, unvaccinated, no more tracking of players, no more mask mandates for players, personnel inside the buildings. It's over. The NFL has beaten COVID.
So say what you will about the political sphere and health and whatnot, because obviously COVID is a thing.
Yeah.
And player health matters. And there could definitely be arguments why there should or should not be those COVID restrictions for that. Speaking purely in a sports mindset, this is awesome because we've had 2 to 3 years of just wonkiness. Processes have changed so much, whether it's who can report where and can they practice, can they play, and all this stuff. We're about to get back into the swing of things from a couple of years ago where these players are able to fully commit and focus on their sport. The coaches, the teams can fully commit. They're not having to walk around or heed all this red tape. I think we're going to have like at least a 6-month hangover while people are figuring out the new normal, which is the old normal again. But for the sport in general, not talking about COVID itself and the health implications of that, this is incredible to finally have things getting back to where they were before. It'll be great for the rest of the combine, the draft, training camp, all those spring camps and stuff like that. It's going to be a great thing for the NFL. Hopefully it doesn't come back and bite them in the ass in any way if we have another variant or something like that. But I'm excited for it. It's nice to see things kind of getting back to where they once were.
Yeah, I agree, man. I've been done with COVID. I've been ready for COVID to be over. I think most people have been ready for COVID to be over. This is a positive sign. Things are starting to turn. When you have the biggest league in the world start to make this change, I think we'll start to see other places follow suit. If the NFL does it, the NBA will probably do it. Major League Baseball will probably do it. We're starting to see, ordinances in states start to kind of taper back.
Yeah, locally yesterday, I believe our county that we're in came out and said that they no longer recommend masks indoors. Right. That if you are immunosuppressed or whatever, to talk to you, not even to wear one, just talk to your healthcare provider to find out what the best course of action is for you. And that if you have COVID, then you should wear a mask.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of how things generally should have been the whole way, or we knew this a while ago. And it's nice to be getting back to that to a point. But I mean, I believe the DOD released something saying that, masks are not necessarily ineffective, but they aren't a necessity anymore. And that should hopefully be trickling down to us with our current jobs
please Christ.
Sooner or later. So it's nice to see things kind of getting back to where we were a couple of years ago. Midterms are coming up, so I think that probably plays a little bit into where politicians are like, we got to do something to make people happy to vote for us. So we're slowly getting there, everybody. It is nice to see this happening in, my favorite sport, that we are starting to get back to where we once were.
Absolutely, man. I'm very pumped for this. So,
yep. In other news, we've got, Brian Griese. That's a name that some people might recognize. Former NFL quarterback, and he's been in the broadcast booth for the past couple of years. He's actually going to be going to be the quarterback's coach for the 49ers, which means what? Trey Lance must be the new fire, right?
I mean, You would think so. Now, Jimmy G is still under contract. He's going to have to get traded. That trade becomes very difficult with the shoulder surgery coming up.
Reckless speculation, I wouldn't be surprised if Jimmy G gets released.
He might get released. I don't know if anybody will trade for him because of the shoulder surgery. I think it's also possible that we see Jimmy G back on that roster. And if Trey Lance does not pan out, they know what they have. They have a known commodity in Jimmy G. They know what he can do. Takes them to the playoffs when he's healthy. So
if Garoppolo stays in that roster, I think it requires a new contract that lowers his hit.
Yeah, probably
quite a bit. And I don't think he agrees to that because I think he knows the story's already written for me here. Trey Lance is what they want to go with sometime in the future, maybe not this year. And that he also knows that there's a lot of quarterback needy teams out there, and he's willing to just be like, no, I'm not going to take a new contract. I got to pay me the money, or I'm going to go out there and get my money because he absolutely could get paid for all the issues that Jimmy G has. He's still an efficient quarterback.
He's a winner.
He's proven known commodity, and like you said, he wins. So I could absolutely see him getting released at the end of the day, which would be surprising because you think that you could move him for something.
Now, do you think that if a team trades for him, they're trading for him to come in and be their starter, or is he a bridge guy for them, you think?
At this point, I think he's more than a bridge, but less than a surefire starter. Because we know that Jimmy has limitations. He definitely has limitations. The injury doesn't help completely. I see him going to Pittsburgh personally. But
I can see that.
Because Mason Rudolph ain't the fucking fire.
No,
Pittsburgh.
No.
I think he is one of those guys that you can get. You're willing to pay more money than you would normally for a bridge, because you know that worst comes to worst, this guy can be your quarterback for the next 4-5 years if need be. But it's not going to prevent you from looking at other options and trying to upgrade through the draft or what have you, which is kind of a nice thing because you know that you're going to get him on less than a full-time surefire starter salary probably.
Yeah, I don't think he's commanded much, probably more than
25.
Even that's still starter money in the NFL.
That's
bottom end starter.
We'll see after this free agency cycle though. You got guys like Kirk Cousins who are going to be looking at 38 to 40 a year. Rodgers potentially 50 a year.
I think Matt Ryan's looking at 48.
He ain't getting a new contract, but he is one of the top 3 paid quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
I think he's the highest cap hit of anybody this year. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But.
Yeah. So that's why I feel like 25 for Jimmy. Like I believe Bridgewater got like 17 with the Broncos, and that was to be a competitive quarterback who could start or be a bridge or be the backup. I think 25 for Jimmy G, that could be right around where he's comfortable, but he's still not killing your cap hit or anything like that. But to stay on the 49ers roster when they just traded so much capital for Trey Lance would be difficult to do. Now, for what it's worth, Trey Lance, there has been videos out there showing him in practice. I don't know if you've seen them.
I have not yet.
But it was stuff that was kind of, I don't want to say leaked necessarily because these are not all 22 type footages from practice, but those high angle views, and he was making some pretty damn good throws, accurate, on the move, really strong arm. It looked really good. But whoever has that tape, you only see the cut up of 5 to 8 throws. You're not seeing everything else in between.
Right.
So you don't really know completely what you have.
This is a guy that we knew was going to need at least a year to sit and learn.
Yeah.
When he was coming out, because he didn't play much fucking football. Supremely talented, very athletic, but didn't play a ton because he was an FCS guy and they canceled their whole season. He sat out. So he was going to need some seasoning. Maybe he's starting to catch that stride. If they like what they see, I could see a release. I mean, a trade. I don't know what they can get for Jimmy G realistically. I think the top end would be a third.
So right now with the combine going on, all the agents and the GMs and stuff are all here at the combine. This is where a lot of those talks happen for those trades. They're going to be finding out what the market is for them. And I think high end at this point is a second if people really believe in Jimmy G.
See, I think the shoulder surgery knocks him down a little bit, though.
It probably will.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you can get something for a player instead of nothing, you go for it. So if it ends up being a 5th round pick, I mean, I'm taking that over not getting a 5th.
Yeah, agreed.
The only thing that you have to take into consideration there is when you lose a player, you can get comp picks, but if you release them, you're not getting the comp picks.
Right.
So I would take something over nothing. And if that ends up being a later pick, like a 5th or something like that, then it sucks because you traded for this guy for a lot more, but at least you're getting something out of it. But NFL teams also are going to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be like, well, if you're just going to release him anyways, and we're not going to give you anything, and we will work something out because we got an enviable spot for him to come, and maybe he'll want to come play for us. So,
right. So
we'll see.
Speaking about guys who could potentially be released, who, they want to try to get some compensation if they can, that takes us to the Amari Cooper story with the Cowboys. Cowboys are likely to release Amari Cooper. He is owed $20 million this year. He signed a big 5-year, $100 million deal a couple years back. And now they are going to move on from Amari Cooper. He is not going to be on that team.
They're close to a deal with Gallup to extend Gallup long term, and that just means that Cooper's contract is not going to fit with them, so he's going to end up having to be moved. And so I believe they said that he's either going to be released by the beginning of the new league year, or
they're going to look for a trade. They're going to look for a trade, but who is trading? I mean, you can get it. I think the highest you can get for Amari Cooper right now, if you're the Cowboys, is a 5th. Because you're going to take on Amari Cooper, who's a pretty good receiver, but he's owed $20 million. Is he worth that?
And a little bit of injury prone.
Is he worth that $20 million that you'd be giving up?
It really depends on the team. A Jacksonville Jaguars, where you have tons of cap room and you need playmakers. I could, if I'm them, I'm willing to make a trade, especially for a 5th or a 4th or something like that, because you're getting a second round to a low end first round value out of a guy. It's just the money is a tough pill to swallow for most teams. But when you have all that cap and it isn't like a super long-term contract, it's going to be off the books sooner than later. Get something in that's good possession, sure-handed receiver for Trevor Lawrence and just add to that offensive arsenal. Like a Jaguars would make sense to me, but that's the only teams, because you're not going to be seeing the Rams, who don't have picks, trade for this guy.
Now, the Browns have been talked about as in consideration of going to make a play for Amari Cooper. I don't know if that happens via a trade, though. I think if they is released, the Browns are going to go talk to him.
Yeah, that for a lot of teams, it would have to be like a sign and trade type of thing in order to make his contract work for them, or they'd have to have something worked out with him prior to the trade. Be like, okay, if we trade for you, are you willing to take this sort of deal? Because, like you said, $20 million for him is a pretty penny.
Yeah,
he's a good receiver. He's not a $20 million receiver.
I don't think so.
Because you're talking top end wide receiver type money for that. So, but he's a name to watch, because he will be moved one way or the other within the coming weeks. And so, if your team needs a good receiver, he's someone to watch for.
Yeah, I mean, he could get traded. And now with the fact that they reported they're likely to release him, I don't think you can get anything more than a 5th for him. If they shopped him before, maybe they can get some more. But I mean, anything going back to the Cowboys, they would appreciate. If not, he is going to be released, and he will be a free agent out on the market. And there will be some teams who are definitely in play. Wide receiver needy teams will absolutely go and take a look. They will not sign him to a $20 million contract unless they are really, really badly looking for a weapon. Like you said, the Jags. We could see a Jets make a play if they're talking about, that much money, given a small capital, because Zach Wilson needs a fucking weapon, even though I don't know if he'll do much with it. But they will absolutely need something up in New York. Either one of those New York teams, two teams that are actually not in New York, but say they're from New York. So we could see something like that happen, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Mario the next week or so, because it's going to happen pretty soon.
Yeah, things are accelerating here. We're going to see a lot of, like I said, all the agents and all the GMs are here in Indianapolis right now at the Scouting Combine. And as much as it is to watch these prospects and interview them and stuff like that, they're going out to the steakhouse at night and rubbing shoulders. They're, tipping some drinks and stuff like that and seeing how much a guy's worth. This is, if a Kirk Cousins is going to get traded, this is where the deal is going to formulate.
Yep.
If Jimmy G gets traded, this is where the deal is going to formulate. A lot of this stuff is going to accelerate here within the next week to two, right before we get into free agency, because any of those big trades are going to happen prior to free agency happening, because teams want to know what their cap situation is going to look like before they jump into things.
We got a couple of comments there, it looks like.
So Kenneth Easley, Amber, love how autocorrect always works at the worst time, because she said face booge. And we have Spaced Out 707. Shout out Pops.
I don't know who that is.
Me either.
All right. Well, hey, Spaced Out 707, appreciate you for hopping in on the stream.
Absolutely. All right. So the only other real news that I can think of for NFL, other than we got the combine going on, free agency coming up, and the stuff that we've already talked about, is Cole Beasley got permission to seek a trade.
Yeah.
Bills granted him permission to seek a trade. That'll be interesting, because Beasley, he is what he is. He's a solid receiver.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a barn burner or anything like that by any means. We've seen some receivers elevate themselves with the Bills, where Beasley's like, a third option.
He's a third option. He's a slot guy.
Option. And if he's able to get a trade, cool. But it's not going to be for a ton.
No.
Which I think ends up working out for the Bills. It's not a big deal if they were to move him. Obviously, there's been a whole bunch of shit surrounding Cole Beasley because of his thoughts on masks and stuff like that. But now that that's gone to the NFL, it's not really a red flag anymore.
No.
So
he could I think he could get traded. I think he probably will. Won't be for a lot of compensation. Teams are at this point with the combine going on. They're seeing some of these receivers out there. And they're like, okay, is Cole Beasley better than a guy I can get in the 5th round? There's a very deep wide receiver class.
This is a very good wide receiver draft.
So, I mean, he probably will get traded.
But I mean, the thing with Cole too is he's 32 years old. Mm-hmm. He's not some spring chicken.
No.
So I could see him getting moved, and it would be for a late pick, a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick. But even then, I don't think that he's going to get traded. Personally, I think that if anything, he could probably get released, and then he'll be a veteran signing on some team that needs an extra guy, a third guy, or something like that after the draft.
Right.
I'm not even sure that we see him get picked up in the beginning of the free agency cycle.
He'll be a 2nd, 3rd wave signing guy.
Yeah. So Beasley got permission to seek a trade. I don't know that that'll really happen, because it's not like he's a bad receiver, but again, we have a good receiver draft. There's going to be plenty of options that are in his level of play that are going to be hitting free agency, that are potentially younger options and stuff like that. And teams love to stay young if they can.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I could see Beasley working out in a Tampa.
Yeah, that would make sense. Secure
AB
guy.
is not there anymore.
He's not going back there either.
Godwin is kind of up in the air. What's going to be happening?
Sounds like Godwin's probably going to be able to hit free agency.
So
he's going to get paid top dollar somewhere.
So giving them another receiving option, a veteran guy, someone that fits in with that kind of slot role, makes sense down there. But I mean, Beasley could fit with a lot of teams in general.
Yeah, just a veteran guy who can move the sticks. Teams always covet those guys. Not high-end money, not high-end pick value. Like, he's going to be somebody who is signed somewhere. His career is probably not over.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see, where he can catch on. He makes perfect sense to me up in New England if he is released.
That's true. I can see New England as well.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, I think we can get into NFL draft talk. So like I said, we're going to go over quarterbacks this week. However, I was going to discuss with everybody our schedule or our plan as of right now, subject to change, of how we're going to be breaking down the draft prospects, or what the next 6-7 weeks are going to look like as far as NFL talk. Of course, we're going to talk anything going on in sports, anything going on in the NFL. But in particular, we've got all these different draft prospects coming out. We've got free agency coming up. So this is kind of what we're looking at. All right. So today, again, going over the quarterbacks here on the 5th of March. Next weekend, our plan is to go over the wide receivers and running back groups. They've already had their time at the combine.
Yep.
Pretty impressive, especially from those wide receivers. So that'll be fun to talk about. The weekend, March 19th weekend, free agency will have begun. It begins on the 16th, I believe.
That's that legal tampering period.
Mm-hmm.
And then.
So on March 19th, we'll be able to go over what signings have happened, rumors, things like that, and really focus on free agency that weekend, which that could be an extensive show depending on how crazy free agency is this offseason, which I kind of expect it to be. The following weekend after that, weekend March 26th, we'll be going over the offensive lineman and the tight end groupings, who they just finished up their stuff yesterday, I believe.
Tight ends were day one, and then linemen were yesterday and part of day two with the running backs. And there's some really, really good prospects that I see out of both of those groups, some guys that are sleepers, in my opinion. I'm very excited to get to that. Obviously, this is the Lineman Lounge, so I was following those guys pretty fucking closely yesterday.
Absolutely. We have April 2nd that weekend. We'll be planning to go over the entire defensive line. That's interior, exterior, edge rushers, things like that. 3-4, 4-3 guys. April 9th, we'll be going over the linebackers and defensive backs. And that will wrap it up essentially for going over the position groups. Now, obviously, there's special teams, your kickers, your punters. They don't really do anything.
I don't really give a shit about what they do at the combine.
They're such a unknown when it comes to the NFL that they're not really worth going over. And then that leads us into the weekend of April 16th, where we're probably going to be starting off our mock draft time frame. So that week and the week after are weeks where we don't have the draft yet. Free agency is not wrapping up, but the real movers and shakers of free agency will kind of have calmed down, and we'll have 2 weeks. That's being the 16th and the weekend after, where we'll be doing our mock drafts potentially with some of the pods,
right?
Some of our friends around here. And once we get closer to that, we'll start putting out information. If you want to join us on the show, represent your team, and be part of a mock draft where we go through a full first round of potential picks, we'll be putting out information for that for people to join us and kind of get involved with the show for that. But that's our tentative schedule for how we're going to put out some of this content going over these position groups and what the NFL landscape looks like here for the next roughly 8 weeks.
Yeah, so we got a busy 8 weeks. I know for sure that we want to do, and the guys over at the Cheap Seats podcast want to do a mock draft with us. I still need to reach out to some guys, some of those other Browns-centric podcasts, see if they want to get involved as well. So the podcast one, I think, will be fun. But I'm really looking forward to kind of having our own little individual one like we did last year. Hoping we get Goose back in here. Maybe we'll get Spicy Mike. I know Kayla talked about potentially getting in here to represent her Denver Broncos. Might get, some Torres in here for the Colts.
Some Colts fans.
Yeah, or some Kimmel in there for the Colts as well. Maybe see those guys do a little group session so they can come up with a pick unanimously for the Colts. It'll be very interesting to see what the Colts are looking for at that point, because there's going to be some movement probably at their quarterback position.
They're one of those teams that's expected to be a buyer potentially for a quarterback. But speaking of quarterbacks, that's what we're going to be going over today is the quarterback prospects. So the quarterbacks have already performed at the scouting combine.
They have.
I believe you've got their testing numbers pulled up, Mike.
I do.
All right. So for quarterbacks, this is an interesting draft because it's not a great quarterback draft.
It's not.
Both top end and mid rounds. In most other years, I think the guys that are projected as potential first-round picks this year would be late first round or day 2 guys in general. That's
right.
Second or third round picks. But NFL is a quarterback league. Quarterbacks are the most important position on the field, and that is going to elevate quarterbacks regardless of if they're talented enough to be first-round picks. they're going to be pushed in the first round, potentially early first round.
Right.
So, like I said, we want to go over the top prospects in each of these position groups and potential sleepers. And for me personally, I don't really have sleepers.
I don't have a sleeper either
in the quarterback.
Well, maybe one guy I would consider a sleeper, guy that we talked about very early on in the year that we followed, that I think is moving his way up into a potential late first round pick. But that's the closest thing I got to a sleeper because none of these guys are really jumping off the screen at me.
And that's I've got one that I will consider a sleeper. No one's sleeping on him, though. It's just he's going to be one of those more middle round picks who has a potential to maybe build himself into something more. But we'll go through these guys and talk about them. Just know that we don't really have a true sleeper because a lot of these guys in other drafts
would be sleepers. All of them would be sleepers
or mid round picks. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to go off of CBS's list here of their top guys.
Okay.
And we can kind of work through this. So first on their list, Matt Corral from Ole Miss. He's a junior quarterback and he's 6'2", 205. And how do you feel about Matt Corral?
So Matt Corral is an interesting guy. So he proved that, he could play against some of the best competition in the country down there in the SEC. Had a pretty good year. This guy who can throw the ball, who actually did a pretty damn good job of running the ball. I believe he had 800 rushing yards for that Ole Miss team and performed pretty well. Now, we did not see Matt Corral at the combine because he is dealing with an injury. So we didn't get to see him compete against some of these other quarterbacks. So he's got no 40, no bench, no vertical, no broad jump, no 3-cone, no 20-yard shuttle, no 60-yard shuttle. So we can't measure any of his athleticism, right? We didn't see him throw. Like he did not do really anything except for interviews. Now, everything that I was hearing, his interviews went very well. Smart kid, very nice, respectable person. But you have to wait until kind of his pro day to see what he can do. Everything on tape looks pretty good. It doesn't look great, but it looks pretty good. In other
years, I think that he is a late first, early second type of quarterback.
Yeah.
If he was able to perform at the combine, not rehabbing the injury, we could be seeing him this year move up into the middle top first round. Because of the injury, he is a late first to early day 2 pick for me. At least I'm not even necessarily saying talent wise. I think that's just where he's going to go because teams aren't going to know necessarily what they get. There are at least 8 teams out there that are quarterback needy or going to be looking towards the future. And so he's one of those guys that, he's going to probably have to sit for a year while he continues to rehab and works in the NFL game. And so taking him in the later first round, there's no expectations of him starting early or anything like that. He's overall a good quarterback, nothing flashy, nothing that really jumps out to me. But he's a solid option that I think will at least be a backup in this league with the potential to start for at least a couple of years, but nothing that really jumps out to me.
Yeah. He looked okay. I was never real big sold on this guy. A guy who, competed to get into his position as a starter late in his career at Ole Miss. He could be a solid backup. I don't think anybody, if they're making a first round pick on this guy, I think that it's a reach. To me, he is a day 2 guy, middle day 2. But because this is a quarterback needy league, we could see him elevated late first, early second round. I'm not a huge Matt Corral guy right now. And maybe I'll see some tape. Maybe we'll see how he performs his pro day and it could elevate it for me. But right now, I don't have a lot of things to say about Matt Corral. He's just kind of there for right now.
Mm-hmm. All right, so next on this list is a guy that has definitely moved up boards as the years gone along, and this combine has definitely helped him out. And that's Malik Willis from Liberty. All right, so Liberty, smaller school. He's a junior, and he's a more small type of guy. He's only 6'1", 215. He definitely looks thick for that 6'1". He has some issues as far as his accuracy, but his deep ball looks phenomenal. And this guy is definitely more of that dual threat. He is good at running the ball. He's your more explosive guy. If there's a boom or bust type of guy, it's Malik Willis in this draft. And he fits a little bit more in with the modern NFL because NFL quarterbacks these days, they want you to be able to be mobile. You know, the traditional pocket passing quarterback is not dying, but it is a advantage to have a guy who's a playmaker as well. You see that in Lamar Jackson, where his running talent almost, overpowers his arm talent. And so Malik Willis is really intriguing. Now, watching him in the combine, I believe a new drill that they had this year was where they would gauge their throwing power. They had him thrown into a wall and engaging the speed. And I believe he had the highest throw speed of any quarterback. And then watching his deep balls, it looked natural. It didn't look like he was just floating things up. He was able to throw that ball like a fucking awesome quarterback. Exactly what you want to see for the deep ball. His intermediate stuff looked good too. Some of the knocks on him has been his accuracy, and he's had more interception than you'd like to see, but I think that's stuff that can be worked
Liberty,
out.
I think probably has a little bit of an impact on that.
He was with Auburn originally. So he's really interesting. I think he'll probably be the first quarterback off the board.
I think so too.
And I see him going around that 10 to 12 range. You pick 10 to 12. I don't think anyone's going to move up into the single digits for him necessarily. Maybe up to 8 type range. But he's not like a surefire. You look at last year's draft or the year before, and I think he's not even a first round guy.
I don't think so.
Maybe end of the first round, which, again, it's a weak quarterback draft. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see a guy like this go higher. Again, it's that boom or bust for him. His floor is kind of low, but his ceiling could be really high. There's been some comps of him being like a Russell Wilson type of player. I don't know if I see that completely. I think he's more mobile than Russell.
I think he probably is as well.
I think that he's an in-between of a Lamar and a Kyler.
So I was thinking his comp would be very similar to what we saw last year with Trey Lance. Guy didn't play a lot of high competition, needs a little bit more seasoning, very mobile.
I think Lance's ceiling is higher.
I think it might be as
think
well.
Malik is going to be able to play sooner, though.
Well, so Malik has a fucking rocket attached to his fucking right shoulder. Kid can absolutely sling it. Those deep balls that he was throwing, they looked effortless. Like he's throwing it out there 60 yards at the combine, and it looked smooth. It looked natural. Now, we didn't get any testing numbers on this guy. He didn't run. He didn't do the bench vertical, none of that stuff, okay? But if you turn on the tape, you can see that this guy is incredibly athletic. That's one of the reasons why people are starting to elevate him a little bit, I think, because that's the way that the modern NFL quarterback is being evaluated now, is what else can they do besides win from the pocket? Right? You got to win from the pocket. You have to. But if you can extend plays, get outside, break, contain, you can put a lot of pressure on a defense, and that's why Malik, I believe, is starting to be elevated. I think he probably right now is the first quarterback off the board. It's going to be him or Kenny Pickett. But, I mean, he looked fucking great during the combine. Like, teams are taking those out. He's not throwing the receivers that he knows, doesn't know the speed of all these guys, and he's putting it right on the money. Like, he didn't show any of those accuracy issues that people were worried about when he was coming out of Liberty. I think Malik has a chance to be a starter right away. I don't know if that's the best thing for him, but I think that that's probably the position that he will be thrust into, being drafted high. We could actually potentially see a trade up for this guy because people like his upside. Right now, I like what I see. Is he a guy that I would take over most of the quarterbacks from last year's draft? I don't think so. I probably would have even had Zach Wilson higher than him last year, and I was not a Zach Wilson guy. But Malik has shown in the combine, you can turn on the tape, and he's very athletic. He's a guy who will go out and make plays. People love laser rocket arms, and the accuracy issues that people used to worry about in the NFL, those have kind of started to subside. Those are the same, worries that people had about Josh Allen. We see him make huge strides by, tightening up his mechanics, and you can improve your accuracy once you get those things under your belt. And I think people are starting to think, okay, maybe Malik is kind of like that, where he is a guy who maybe does have some mechanical issues, but we can fix those now. And that's why I think he's going to be the first guy off the board. And we'll probably, if there is a guy taken in a top 10 of this draft at quarterback, it will be Malik Willis.
Yeah. And like I said, my thought is that he's that mix between a Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray. Mobile guys. Kyler's a little bit smaller. Malik's obviously bigger than him. But I like his arm talent. I'm not a huge fan of Kyler Murray. Mm-hmm. I think he's good. I suppose that's something that we could have talked about too. I guess Kyler did put out, his agent put out a little letter, how he's wanting to get paid a little bit more and stuff like that. I didn't personally like the look, but
I think it was terrible.
Yeah. But neither here nor there. I think Malik Willis's potential is to be better than Kyler Murray in the NFL. Kyler obviously was in MVP talks earlier in the season last year because he was performing very well. But I don't know. He fits somewhere in that range for me. Look, if my Vikings were to go after him, I would be excited.
Yeah.
Because it would be a huge shift in how our offense would be run, because you're going from more of a traditional type of pocket quarterback to
and his upside is incredibly enticing, but I worry about his floor.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that with first round picks, you don't want to have that possibility of a bust.
Yeah.
And the guy has bust potential for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is a boomer bust prospect, I think.
Yeah.
More so than I think any other quarterback that we're going to talk about, because we know a lot about the other guys and what they are. And Malik is kind of one of those guys that shows up late on the scene. We see it every year. Somebody starts to rocket up the fucking draft board, and that's Malik this year. So I worry about he's that boomer bust prospect in my mind.
Yep. Next in the list is Kenny Pickett. So Kenny Pickett, senior quarterback from Pittsburgh. He is 6'3", 220, but the talk of him this week after the combine is his hand size. So Kenny Pickett's hands measured at 8.5 inches, which would be the smallest of any starter in the NFL. Now, it's the guy that wears 2 gloves, just like Teddy Two Gloves does, because he wants to make sure he's got a good grip on the ball. For me, hand size matters, but it's not that important. It depends on where you play if hand size matters. If he's going to an NFC North, an AFC North, AFC East, where he's playing and he's really inclement weather conditions, I start to worry a little bit about the hand size, because small hands, lots of fumbles. This is a guy that had quite a bit of fumbles in his college career. And I think that is something that will scare a couple people away depending on where they play. This kid, if he is drafted to a place where he's going to be in a dome all the time, or he's playing in good weather, I don't think hand size makes a big difference whatsoever. It's frustrating when you have something that, you can't work on to make better.
Right.
You can try to work on getting a faster 40 time. You can lift more to get stronger. You can't really do anything to make your hands bigger. And no matter how many gas station pills you get, you can't make your wiener bigger.
Kenny Pickett's hands are smaller than mine. If they measure it this way, his hands are as big as mine. I'm 5'7".
I'm looking up how NFL measures hands, because I'm interested in this. How does NFL measure hands? They measure the hands by taking a tape measure from the tip of the thumb to the pinky finger with the hand outstretched. So, average size for a male hand is 8.5 inches.
So he's got an average size hand. My hand is bigger than Kenny Pickett's by that measurement.
So you got it at 8.5 right now?
I've got it at 8.5 right now.
That's, if I'm really trying to stretch this baby out, I've got at least an inch on that.
Yeah. So I'm 5'7". You're what, 6 foot?
6'1".
6'1". Kenny Pickett's not a small guy by any means.
I'm almost 10 inches.
So
we'll say 9 3/4.
So Kenny Pickett has relatively small hands for a guy playing in the NFL, a guy his size. But it's not one of those things that's going to make a huge difference depending on where he plays. Now, his testing numbers were pretty good.
Yep.
This is a guy who can run pretty well. This is a fake slide guy.
Yeah, as far from what I've heard, the hand size is the concern, but out of all the quarterbacks, everything considered, he's moved up the most
Right.
and had the best combine of them. I still like what I saw from Malik Willis better personally, but he did well in all the drills. The only hit on, like, did well in the interviews. The only hit on him is that hand size. And if the gloves are able to bridge that gap, then it's not that big of a deal for me.
I agree.
But I'd like to say physical traits like size of things doesn't matter that much. But with the hands, it can matter. I mean, you're talking about the size of a football isn't going to change.
The size of football is not changing.
And I looked through some pictures just because there was so much talk about his hand size. He does grip the ball way further back towards the tip of the football in order to get a better grip on it. That plus the gloves, maybe that fixes the situation. But I mean, there's got to be something like there's a reason why you don't see 5'5" offensive linemen. Size matters in certain scenarios. In other scenarios, it doesn't matter as much. But for a guy playing quarterback, I understand why the hand size can make a difference. Your point about playing indoors, outdoors, most of the league you're playing in good weather or indoors until you get into the later part of the year and you start going up north. But you're still going to have rain games and stuff like that. And rain, even with gloves, is pretty difficult. It could definitely shape games for teams. He's going to be a first-round pick.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
This is a guy I knew was kind of going to be a first-round pick. I thought he was going to be the first player off the board until we got to the combine. We saw the really good things that Malik Willis did, which kind of elevated him up. I think somebody will go up there for that athleticism. But Kenny Pickett is no slouch when it comes to athleticism. Yeah. He did do some of the testing. He ran a 4.73. That's pretty damn good for a quarterback. That is mobile enough to get outside the pocket and make a play with your feet if you need to. Okay.
I see him going in the 15 to 25 range.
Yeah. So
it's a pretty wide range considering the first round.
I could see this guy going to the Washington Commanders at pick 11, just outside the top 10, but above that 15 mark.
I see the Saints as an option.
Saints as an option if he gets past 11, and the Commanders, they're going to be playing in a dome almost always. Or
technically, he's an option for my Vikings as well.
Yeah.
But again, I like Malik Willis the best out of this class. I like that high upside, even though the bust potential does scare me.
And Kenny Pickett he's athletic. Like, he ran the third best time from the quarterbacks. His vertical 33.5 inches, plays third amongst the quarterbacks. Broad jump 10'1", third amongst the quarterbacks. Did he run the 3 cone? He did not run the 3 cone.
My fear is that Kenny Pickett has the potential to be, for his floor, that mid-tier backup quarterback, a Blaine Gabbert, something like that, Drew Lock maybe. I think that could potentially be his floor. For his ceiling, I just don't see that high of a ceiling. I'm not seeing a top 10 quarterback out of him ever, personally.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
If he reaches his max potential, that is.
If he reaches his max potential, I think he is a middle-of-the-road starter. Yeah. At best. He is not a guy that you build a franchise around, probably. The hand size is a little bit of a concern, not so much for me. I know there's still some old heads in the NFL who consider that to be very important. But those are also the same guys that want, 6'5", 230-pound quarterbacks who can't fucking move. So the numbers show he's pretty athletic. He threw the ball well during the on-the-field drills. Not a laser rocket arm, fairly accurate. But once again, this is another guy who's just kind of like middle of the road. Like, I'm not excited about him.
Yeah, same. He will be a first-round pick, but you're seeing him mid to late first round, and in other years, he's probably not a first-round guy.
Probably not.
All right, next in line, we have Sam Howell out of North Carolina. He is 6'1", 225, and I think he's possibly the most pro-ready quarterback. He's your easiest plug-and-play quarterback. Again, not a high ceiling, but his floor is actually not as low either. I think that he has that potential to be a higher-end backup as his floor, and a guy that you could potentially put out there if you need a quarterback this year, and he's not going to go out and just lose you games outright. But again, his ceiling, though, I think is like if he were to reach his max potential, you're talking about the number 20 quarterback in the league. And I don't see him going in the first round. If he goes in the first round, it would be one of the last picks in the first and possibly a team moving in there just because they need a quarterback right now.
I could see him late going to the Lions in the first round, number 32.
I could see that.
Because I think if you get him, you're going to want the fifth-year option just in case he does turn into that guy. This is a guy who probably last year was projected to probably be a first-round pick. He was going to be, once again, late first-round pick. People expected him to have a much better year this year than he did after what he did last year. He takes a step back. Now he's once again in that same boat. He did not test. He's also dealing with a lower leg injury. Threw the ball well. Got a pretty good arm. I think he threw like 59 miles an hour into that new drill where they test your speed. I think he probably is the guy who's most ready to come in and compete for a starting spot just because his floor is not incredibly low. People have been scouting this guy for a couple of years now. They know exactly what he is. I'll be interested to see what he does on his pro day to see how he tests out in terms of all the athleticism stuff because he's another guy who's fairly athletic, 600 to 800 rushing yards, and was kind of hurt by the fact that North Carolina lost basically all of their fucking weapons last year in the draft. So he performed pretty well throughout the year. I see him as a very bottom of the first round. I think maybe the Lions are in play at 32, unless they trade out of that and then into the second round. But once again, this is another guy that I'm not super excited about. I'm not real down on him like I am. I'm not worried about his floor like I am some of these other guys, though. He's just he's another guy.
Yeah. Which is a fairly common theme with the quarterbacks in this draft, unfortunately. All right, next on the list, my guy that I've talked about earlier throughout the year, Desmond Ridder.
Yeah.
So Ridder actually had himself a very good combine so far. He is a senior from Cincinnati. He's 6'4", 215. Some people are worried about him being a little bit lighter. They like to see him more in that 230 range, but I think he fills out his frame well at that 215-ish range. I'd like to see a little bit more bulk, and I think that will happen as he progresses through his NFL career.
Once he gets into an NFL weight room, he's going to be okay.
Yep. So the knocks on Ridder are stuff that we've talked about throughout the season. Like the guy's got a pretty good arm. His accuracy is questionable at times. He is definitely an athlete. He's got legs. He's not going to be a Mike Vick or something like that dynamic, but he's got better legs than a lot of quarterbacks in the draft do. He's able to be mobile and whatnot. I don't think that offensive system supported him well at Cincinnati, despite them obviously being a very good team. I would like to see him get his accuracy touch down a little, or better for the NFL game. The comps for him, which I didn't see at first, but he with combine drills and his size and everything are almost identical to Marcus Mariota.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm seeing from Desmond Ridder as his floor is he'll be a Marcus Mariota where could he be a starter? Sure. But he'll at least be a solid backup option for you. Someone that has a little bit more mobility. He obviously has that larger size that you like to see from a quarterback, the height to see over the offensive line and stuff helps. And he has the upside of the mobility and a live arm. I think that he does have a decent ceiling where he could end up being a top 15 quarterback in the NFL if he were to reach that ceiling. The odds of him reaching that ceiling, though, I think are a little bit lower. And that's why, there's talks about him potentially creeping into the first round, especially with his combine performance. I still see him as a day two guy. I feel really solid about him going in the second round. And I think someone will have at least a quarterback that can compete for a starting job. Whether or not he's an NFL starter long-term, I'm not sold on that. But if you have a team that has a quarterback situation, I don't know if he's a great fit for the Browns, but you guys have questions with Baker.
Right.
It's that sort of a situation. If you have a starter there, but you have questions, this guy's good competition with potential good upside. And worst case, you come out with a really solid backup.
Yeah. So this is guy, he tested off the charts in compared to what some of the other quarterbacks did. Ran a 4.52 in the 40. We know he's quick. We know he can use his legs. Vertical, 36 inches, highest among quarterbacks. He also had the fastest 40 among quarterbacks. Broad jump, 10.7, highest among quarterbacks. 3-cone, 7.15. That was fourth amongst quarterbacks. And then 20-yard shuttle, 60-yard shuttle, I'm not too worried about, especially for a quarterback. That's not a concern of mine. Okay. So he's incredibly athletic. He's tall. He has a pretty good arm. Accuracy issues sometimes were a little bit of a question, but I think that's consistency with his throwing mechanics.
Yeah. It does seem like a mechanics thing with his throwing.
Yeah.
That could be worked out through a competent quarterback coach in the NFL. And like I've been saying, I did not like the offensive system for him there at Cincinnati. I think if you get him in the right system, you could have a little bit of a gem where you're able to get closer to that ceiling potential for this guy. It's just, we don't know that for sure because we weren't able to see it in college as much.
Right. So for me, this is kind of like my sleeper. This is a guy that any normal year, I think that he definitely falls into day 2, potentially down a little farther. I think this guy does creep into the first round. And one thing that scares me is the team that I think he's going to go to could be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another guy from Ohio that the Browns don't go out and get, goes out to Pittsburgh and, is a thorn in our side for a long time. I think he has some real upside, but he has to be in the right system. He has to be in an environment that kind of fosters his growth. The Steelers are going to have a massively down year this year because Mason Rudolph will probably be their starter unless they go make a trade for a big-time guy like a Russell Wilson, a Deshaun Watson. Aaron's not going there, but there are some names out there that they could make a play and be really competitive with a really good quarterback. I see him coming in potentially to the Steelers, sitting behind Mason for a year, getting in that system with Mike Tomlin and kind of developing into a pretty good pro, like a 15 quarterback, somewhere in that 12 to 17 range of quarterbacks in the NFL, because he has a ton of physical traits. He's tall, he's fast, he's got a pretty good arm. He just needs some consistency. He's got to work on those mechanics, I think. So I like him moving up into that first round. I think he could probably be number 3 off the board. I think he could maybe surpass Howell in that remark, because I think for sure 1 and 2 are going to be Pickett and Willis, just because of everybody kind of knows what Pickett is, and everybody's super enamored with Willis's upside. Mm-hmm. So I think the third quarterback off the board, we could see definitely a Desmond Ridder.
Yeah. And I like Ridder. I do. I was hoping to see more out of him this year. And I truly think that the correct system, correct coaching, he could turn out to be a pretty solid quarterback. And if you're able to get him later in the first or in that second, then I think that value is definitely worth it. Next, Carson Strong, quarterback from Nevada. He's 6'4", 215, another bigger guy. To me, he's kind of meh. He is destined to be a backup quarterback in the league. I think in other years, you're talking about a 5th, maybe 6th round pick. This guy could be going up in the 4th, maybe even 3rd round in a year like this. He's destined to be an NFL backup or a 3rd stringer even. He did not look good at the Senior Bowl. No. And scouting combine was just kind of whatever.
Everybody knows this guy has a big arm. But he is a fucking statue. Yep. He is going to have a really good offensive line, be able to protect him. He's going to stand in the pocket. He's not going to move. And he's got a fucking cannon. He's not consistent with his accuracy. He did not have a good Senior Bowl week. He had a very mediocre day at the combine throwing. There were some more accuracy issues that showed up there as well. Carson Strong is a perpetual backup. Reminds me of a Ryan Mallett type guy who can just continue to hang on and be a big arm backup for some team around the league.
Yep. All right. And then the last one that I've got on my list, there's other quarterbacks out there, but we're talking 7th round or undrafted guys who don't really excite me. The next guy on this list, which I could see going as high potentially as the 3rd round, is Bailey Zappi.
Yeah.
All right. So Bailey Zappi, he finished out his college time in Western Kentucky. Before that, he was with Houston Baptist. He's 6'1", 220. So shorter guy, but what pops off about him is arm talent and stats. So during his college career, between the time at Houston Baptist and Western Kentucky, which was five years, he was a redshirt in 2017 at Houston Baptist, but through 4 active seasons, he threw for 14,433 yards at lower competition for most of it,
right.
But at better competition, Western Kentucky last year alone, almost 6,000 yards, 5,967 yards on 687 attempts. That's 476 completions with a almost 70% completion percentage, 62 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Those are impressive numbers regardless of where you go. Obviously, it's going to be a passing system that you're in if you're passing that much.
Right.
And it got me questioning, when you have pitchers and stuff like that, having Tommy Johns on their elbow or, the arm issues, how much wear and tear has been in his arm because of how much he's throwing. It's a little bit less of an issue with NFL quarterbacks. But the guy's obviously got some arm talent.
Yep.
He didn't look the best during the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, he struggled during Senior Bowl week for sure.
But I think that he's a raw guy. He's shown that he can throw the ball. I could see him, like I said, working his way up potentially to like the 3rd round just based off the arm talent and the stats and stuff that he's put out. And his ceiling to me ends up being the Gardner Minshew, Taylor Heineke type level, where you're talking lower end of, starting quarterbacks. But if he needed to be a spot starter, you could possibly get something out of him. That's why he's a sleeper to me, because if you're getting a guy that could end up being one of those fringe starters at the back end of the NFL in the 3rd, 4th round, that's a great value for you.
Yeah. So Bailey Zappi is a guy that I kind of talked about during that Senior Bowl week that I was interested. He struggled during Senior Bowl week, had a much better on-field workout at the combine. He looked like he was throwing the ball pretty well. Accuracy did not seem to be too much of an issue. Now, he does not have a big arm, kind of a middle-of-the-road arm. Did not run great. He ran a 4.88, which is, that's fine for an NFL quarterback, but he's not a guy who who's going to threaten to get outside the pocket too much. 30-inch vertical, about 7th on the list. Broad jump, 9'1", last of all the guys that tested. He's not super athletic. He's got pretty good arm talent, but he's also a smaller guy at that 6-foot range. To me, this guy reminds me of a less athletic and not quite as good an arm as Baker Mayfield. Mm-hmm. We've seen Baker have really great years. We've seen Baker have obviously really fucking down years. At Zappi's best, I kind of see him as a kind of like you put it, the Heineke or somebody like that who is a spot starter. Come in, if you put him in a decent game plan for a week, can be successful, but is not a long-term answer anywhere. This will be a perpetual backup, but could get bumped just because of some size issues that teams would have with him and the lack of athleticism that he kind of shows. Yeah.
If I am a team taking him in the middle rounds to be my long-term backup quarterback, spot starter type guy, I'm feeling really comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So again, it's tough to pick a sleeper in this because a lot of the guys are just not high-end talent. If I had to pick a sleeper, someone who's going to outperform their position, it would be him in those later rounds. But other than that, there's definitely more quarterbacks out there. I don't know how many of them we're going to see get drafted just because it is not a great draft, but it is a good draft in other positions and other areas. So teams will possibly, definitely be bringing in a lot of these guys as, UDFAs to see if they.
There's
can
a ton of
squad or something
camp
like that.
arms
Yeah.
in this group.
Yeah, Tanner Morgan from the Gophers is one of them that Brock Purdy.
Yeah, Brock Purdy, Dustin Crum, Jake Cohen, those guys. Like they're camp arms. You bring them in, you see if you like them. You cut them after camp. You re-sign them to a practice squad. That's what a lot of these guys are.
Yeah.
So
nothing too crazy, nothing that's really jumping out. So, but that kind of wraps it up, I guess, for where I'm at with quarterbacks. Unless there's anyone else specifically that you want to talk about.
I don't think so. Now, I did want to highlight one thing on Malik Willis. So we talked about his ceiling, his athleticism. We think he'll probably be the first guy off the board just because
I definitely think he will be.
And so something that doesn't get talked about a lot in the draft process is how good of guys these people are. So you'll hear about in interviews that they're really smart. Well, Malik is very smart, did very well in his interviews, tested high on the Wonderlic test. But there's also a video that came out of him on the street. There was a homeless woman, just outside of like a Nike area where Malik got some swag. They wanted to have him in, kind of, hey, how you doing? Let's give you some stuff. And Malik sees this woman on the corner on the street. She is homeless. She is, I believe, disabled as well. And he opens up his suitcase and gives her, the swag bag and gives her some other stuff.
This was in Indy.
This was in Indianapolis
at the combine.
And he doesn't know that he's being filmed. So that is a really cool story when you get people in these positions who maybe don't come from a lot of things and they are already trying to give back to a community they're not even necessarily a part of is a really cool thing. I think that is a really nice thing to highlight about Malik is he's a really good fucking guy. He's super smart, ultra athletic, and it really kind of is going to, I think, help push him up the boards as well because you want
that to be the face of your franchise.
Exactly.
The quarterback is the face of your franchise. If you're taking a guy in the first round, you're expecting them to be the face of the franchise, and you want them to obviously be a high character person off the field just as much as they're on the field.
Yeah, and Malik has absolutely shown that in spades so far this week in Indianapolis. So that's one last thing I wanted to touch on with Malik because it was awesome. When I saw it, I was like, that it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, definitely a good, feel good kind of story with him. So that I believe wraps it up for our talk this week, especially draft talk, particularly with quarterbacks. Again, next week we'll be going over the wide receivers and running backs, which running backs are.
They had a pretty decent day.
Mm-hmm.
We had some guys run a lot faster than I expected.
But wide receiver.
Oh man, I am so pumped to get into these wide receivers.
It's a good wide receiver draft.
Yeah, if you are a wide receiver needy team, much like my Cleveland Browns are, you are very excited about some of the prospects, guys who I thought were fourth round picks. Now look like they're not getting out of the second fucking round.
I think you've got guys all throughout this draft that could come in and be starters pretty quick. And we're talking deep third, fourth,
rounds
round guys.
Rounds 1 through 4. You could get a guy who come in and fucking play and probably start for you.
Yeah.
Very deep class.
It's going to be interesting going over those guys. We'll definitely have some sleepers for you there. But I don't know, Mike, you got anything else that we need to go over?
I don't think so, man. It was a good day. I got to get my ass ready to go move things and start to kind of repack this pod. Producer Amber is fantastic. She does so much for us on the show. She does so much for me around the house. What she is not necessarily great at, though, is Tetris and packing shit up. So we're going to have to kind of reconfigure some things. That way we can make sure we get all the things in there that we want to take. Because if it doesn't fit in that pod, it ain't fucking going.
Yeah.
We're moving one goddamn pod across the country if I get this job, and that is it.
All righty. Well, I guess that wraps it up for the week, man.
Yeah, let's get the fuck out of here, man. Good day. I'm very excited for UFC fights tonight. So everybody, thank you guys very much for tuning in. Kind of rocking with us. If you are watching on Facebook, go ahead, join the group, like the page, all that stuff. Tell your friends. If you're on the Facebook, you watch on the Facebook, and you have not subscribed on the YouTube, please go ahead, head over to the YouTube, like, subscribe. We're working on getting our way up to that 100 followers or 100 subscribers. That way we can get our own URL. Everybody who joined us on YouTube, thank you very much. I would hope that you like and subscribe. Not sure who the was that Space Out 707, right? Space. What the hell was his name again?
Spaced Out 707.
Spaced Out 707. Thanks for hopping in, man. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends. You guys can check us out on Twitter as well. You can go ahead and follow there. We got the TikTok, we got the Instagram, and going to be hopefully some more content coming your way. Going to try to get some more stuff on either the Instagram, or I'm thinking about maybe doing a little live video on the Facebook, so all of our Facebook users can see when we go and do our playoffs coming up on April 2nd for our flag football. Kind of get a little inside look at Coach Mike instead of just the loudmouth that sits here behind this microphone.
Sure, absolutely, man.
But I got nothing else, man. Guys, thank you very much. We're going to get the fuck out of here, right?
Absolutely.
So we will be back next week with more breakdown of the combine. Some new information will definitely be coming out about baseball. We'll probably have some
I will
reactions.
not be surprised to see some quarterback movement.
Quarterback movement will happen.
Week.
We'll have some reactions to Street Jesus in Covington tonight. And we look forward to talking to you guys. This is the Lineman Lounge with the thickest podcast in sports. Sleeves are always optional. See you.
Free Kane.
Welcome to the Lineman Lounge, hosted by Mike and Evo, calling their shots and being outlandish.
Breaking news from the Lineman Lounge. My fantasy football team just took a huge fucking hit. And that also makes it even more likely that the Raiders are going to beat the Ravens on Monday night. Le'Veon Bell is about to be your starter. Latavius Murray is going to go there as well. Jesus, fuck my ass.
Get ready for the thickest podcast in the game. Coming to you from Hangar 6, where sleeves are optional. Strap in.